You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. In stark contrast to the cold Silverstone, the Aragon region served us up sweltering temperatures as the Marquezes made the Aragon track their very own desert sandbox. As ever, I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. As always, in the co-host seat, it's Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Kyle, what's up? Well, it was business as usual, return to business as usual with Mark up ahead after the Zarco and Bezzecchi wins. But I think enough to talk about, so let's go.
Absolutely. And returning from his many international superfan travels, it's smooth talking Texan, Adam Rosales. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, doing good. I finally got some time to take part in this. It's been a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. How rude. You've been going off to all sorts of races all over the world. That's a poor pod commitment. But somebody else who doesn't have poor pod commitment is the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
I am looking forward to talking all things this week because I'd say it's business as unusual with Marquez back to the top and all the other things that happened.
Ooh, well, cool. Let's get straight in then for the weekend overview coming into this round. And unfortunately, Ayagura is ruled out after his surgery on his right tibia, I believe. It hasn't quite healed, so he got sent home, which, funny enough, left his bike open for a Moto2 debutant to have a test session on it today. Another Aprilia, which wasn't being raced, was Jorge Martin's Aprilia, as the saga gets a bit spicier with Martin himself saying that he still wants to leave even after Aprilia's fantastic win at Silverstone. What's not so fantastic, unfortunately, is Luca Marini testing for the Suzuka 8 Hours, having a massive crash at turn 1, I believe, in Suzuka. Scary, got some horrible injuries. I think it's a broken hip and a punctured lung. So we all wish Luca a speedy recovery, but he has not been replaced on the factory Honda for this round. And somebody else who's also a bit hobbling, walking wounded, is Morbidelli. After his clash with Aleix at Silverstone, he has a broken bone in his foot. So the standings, we've got Marc Marquez leading the championship on 196 points, with his brother 24 behind, with Bagnaia a further 70 points behind that, and the ever-present Morbidelli 98, and Zarco in the top 5 for the first time, 99 points behind. So, practice, and the first session, FP1, was a bit crazy. Marc Marquez was over a second clear of the field, and we kind of saw this crazy dominance last year, but the first session, that's mad how you can just go out and instantly lay down that pace in, well, it was kind of his backyard, really. This is his sort of home race. Him and his brother spend a lot of time going around here on their 600s, but that's a scary pace, but especially for his teammate Jules, which Bagnaia was not looking great through practice.
It was, to say it again, business as usual, unfortunately for him. Everybody was waiting to see how he would rebound from two crashes on Sundays in the previous 2 weekends, and it was just not happening for him again. While Marquez was clearly out to stamp his authority after Silverstone didn't really go the way he expected it to be, and this is his backyard, and he needed to. And it was clear from the first outing that he was gonna show everybody that he's the leader of the pack, and in form, in machinery, in quality, in skill, he was just undeniably fast.
But this is exactly why I say it's business as unusual, overlooking all the other riders and teams. He has not been what we expected him to be over the last month at all. He needed to, he was about to get overwhelmed by, oh, he's entirely catchable and beatable on this machine. And from a psychological point of view, the last thing you want is your competitors having zero respect for you because they know they're as fast or faster. So I think this was incredibly important to him and to the team. And this is really the first we've seen Marquez, like he sort of came on in the beginning of the season. You're like, oh yeah, he's going to crush this. Well, he's not been crushing it, but this was a return to form. And whether it carries on is what we all got to wait and see.
Yeah, granted, because, let's not forget that it's kind of easy to forget that, he hasn't won since Qatar. He's had like 3 sort of relatively rough rounds. He's been bringing home the points. He got very lucky at Silverstone. So, throwing down the gauntlet here, somebody who got very unlucky at Silverstone was Fabio Quartararo, and he was really struggling in practice, looking frustrated with the Yamaha, slapping the fuel tank. And the Yamahas, what a fall from grace. After a couple of rounds of getting into the groove, it seems, and they're coming back, just they couldn't dial their electronics in, and they were spinning up everywhere and looked like a right handful. But what was nice to see was the KTMs actually not looking like a handful for once, and from being pretty much absent completely at Silverstone. I don't think a single KTM made it through to Q3. We had 3 of them. Q2. We had 3 of them in Q2 this round, Adam.
Yeah, I was mostly just going to correct you about Q2, but KTM, what really surprised me this week was seeing them overtake Ducatis on the straightaway. It's like, where did this engine come from? I don't know if they still have concessions or any kind of development that they've been doing leading up to this, but that was something that really caught me off guard. KTM looked awesome. They look smooth in the corners. I feel like the last few races, or mostly this season, I feel like you can just tell Costa's really trying to push. Binder's crashing more often. I just feel like they seemed a little bit more put together this weekend.
Yeah, and it was really good to see. And they're oddly, Matt Trumpets, they were through the speed traps. The KTM was the fastest bike, and really quite unusual. That engine's a stonker.
And this is, I sort of love this for them and for the sport in general, because they had really fallen off from the expectations we had. They'd really fallen off, and this is sort of a return to form, but also it seems it might be circuit specific for them. Like certain characteristics really seem to suit their bike better, and this in particular really seemed to be like, this works for us. We have exactly what we need to get a really fast single lap in.
Well, you would think that it'd be a single lap, but then seeing how Acosta maintained that gap, or maintained the pace of the leaders, and keeping up with the top 3 in the race distance, I felt like that was a real surprise. And you talk about the circuit specifics, and I think that the circuit's it's a bit unique, where it's got a mix of medium slow corners, but then it's got some really long straights, and that's where I don't know if we've seen that yet this season. Maybe Thailand, but I feel like that one has a little bit more slower corners. But to touch on the circuit specific, I feel like Yamaha might do really well at Assen, and so I have kind of my fingers and toes crossed for Quartararo to get another pole position over there.
Yeah, hopefully, because he didn't look to have a single hope in hell of getting a pole position here. He was really, really struggling. So someone else who sort of struggled a little bit in FP2 was Alex Marquez, who looked like he was getting closer to his brother throughout the whole of the practice. And then in free practice 2, he bins it, so he has to go into quali to use his second bike, and a bit shaken on confidence. So he actually put in a really good performance in the end. So in actual quali, Mark actually looked a little bit ragged on his Q2 lap. He left it right to the end. The others had all closed up massively, and he didn't have this gap. And he looked like he was the old sort of style of Mark, having to override a little bit in his actual quali lap, especially the final sector. He had his foot off the peg at one point. He was over the limit, but managed to drag it round and stick it on pole. And fair play to Alex Marquez. So coming on the second bike, dented confidence, puts it second on the grid, only 0.2 off. And Morbidelli, fantastic performance in third, and Bagnaia looked relieved to get fourth. Really, he had to pull everything out because he'd been struggling, as we've said. And as we mentioned, the KTMs, Acosta in fifth and Binder in sixth, which sets up a really lovely front couple of rows. But somebody who didn't feature in those first couple of rows but also had really good pace was Marco Bezzecchi, who had a bit of a scruffy practice, didn't get into Q2 and then binned it in Q1, so he started 20th. But as we'll see later, he had a stonking ride in the sprint race. So on to the sprint review then, and we had some tyre strategy here, which I know Matt will be very, very excited about. So we had soft rears for just about everybody apart from Aldeguer, did Gin Antonio and I believe Jack Miller, and they all went through medium rears. And it was quite interesting to see this because for Aldeguer particularly, this seemed to work really, really well. And everyone thought the medium was going to be the main race tyre. So, Matt, it's quite surprising not to see more people go for the medium because just about everybody defaulted to the soft, despite that it was over 50 degrees C track temp.
Well, I'm going to go back to the start of the race where Mark ran off the grid and then everyone ran off after him. I think there is a certain amount of follow the leader going on here. And the thing about Aldeguer that impressed me the most was the team. This was an original team pick for this medium rear tire. And when the team said, oh, we think everyone else is going to be on softs, he said, no, you guys did the work. If we don't put this tire on, I don't think he actually said this, but in my mind, this is what he said. If we don't put this tire on and run it, how are we going to find competitive advantages over people who have essentially the same machinery? How are we going to know if your work was worth it or not if we just do what everybody else did? And he ran the medium tire, and it actually made me sad, Kyle. Do you know why it made me sad?
Why?
Because right before the race, they were talking about Quartararo, and they were originally on the medium tire. It was on the graphic, and they said, no, they've switched to the soft. And I saw Aldeguer's closing laps in the sprint, which he was the fastest person on track for the last couple of laps, and you just wondered, like, what would they have done? Because they were struggling, as you said in the practice review, they were struggling with that rear tire coming out of the turns with the electrics and the engine braking and everything. And a stiffer, more solid tire, giving more confidence to the rider. You know, maybe there's something in that, but I was blown away by him making such a mature choice as a rookie.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Again, he is a rookie, and he was getting loads of good feedback for the race on Sunday, but also it was allowing his late race pace, and we've seen this, particularly in slippy conditions as well. He was great at Kota before he binned it. He was brilliant in Le Mans in really tricky conditions. And again, when track temp gets above 50 degrees C, it starts getting greasy and a bit slick and really slippy. And again, it seems to play into his hands. So he's a precocious talent and is going to be amazing for the future. And I actually put in my notes, he had a fantastic ding-dong battle with Acosta, and I was loving this fight between the two of them. And I actually wrote, this is the vision of the future. Like, we're going to get these two knocking several shades of excrement out of each other, I'm sure, in the future, because they don't get on. I don't think Acosta gets on with many riders, to be honest. He seems like his own sort of character, but they come from the same town, and there's a massive rivalry between them, and I love this, so it's all brewing up for the future. But yeah, he ends up getting the better of Acosta and then going off and hunting down Frankie Morbidelli, and I'm kind of guilty of it on this pod. We don't give Morbidelli enough love and praise, really. We say he's a bit of a bandit in practice, but he's always there. He's been one of the most solid riders all season. So Morbidelli doing really well. And Aldeguer hunting down, had a really good battle with him as well. And then another great battle on Sunday with him. But while these are battling, coming off the grid, Mark had a terrible start. And also his teammate, Bagnaia, who looked like both the GP25s on the clean side of the grid, it must be said. Both of them spun up and lost a load of time. Mark managed to recover by cutting underneath people at turn one and was like fourth or third. I think he come out and was kind of okay. And then he then had to pass Morbidelli and then go and pass his brother. And I don't think either of them fought it too hard because they just knew he had faster race pace. They decided to concentrate on themselves. But Bagnaia had an absolute shocker. He dropped down initially, I think it was to 6th or 7th. No, it was down to about 8th, I think, at the end of lap 1, but then made a mistake going into turn 3, I think it was. Almost lost the front, run very wide and dropped all the way down to 13th. He did recover to 12th, but shocking. This is like arguably the lowest sort of point of his season so far on the Saturday. It was really bad. Pointless, Jules. Another pointless race for him, and yeah, he must have been panicking.
I can only imagine so. And I think what this showed was that it's not the first time that we see both GP25s, and I'm not discarding Digi, but he wasn't in the first couple of grid lines anyway, but that they have difficult getaways. Also, practice starts regularly go bad, and like you said, they were pretty much on the most ideal positions. P1 and P4, they were on the racing line. So at Aragon, that's a big plus, because the rest of the tarmac outside the racing line was just dirty and slippery. But somehow they often get the start not in an ideal way. And what you saw with Bagnaia was what we saw with Mark and him in earlier races this year, that once they get into traffic, that bike gets even more harder to ride. And it's almost like, and especially in Bagnaia's case, with such a tricky front, it's like he's almost riding on ice. And he just fell back down the order, and he had that mistake. I believe it was turn 7. But anyway, he dropped back to 13, and he could only make up one place. And I even think that was because Jack Miller had a long lap penalty. So
for taking Mir out.
Yeah, and the bike seems really hard to ride in traffic.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah. Trumpets, like Mark even alluded to this. He said when he's passing Morbidelli and his brother to make the passes, he was getting front locking, and the passes were quite on the edge. He was struggling.
Yeah, and this is the thing. The further back you are, the more impacted you're going to be by the number of bikes in front of you. So going backwards as much as Bagnaia did at the start is you're just almost locking yourself into a downward spiral at that point with a bike. But he's not been shy about saying the overtakes have been really difficult for him this season with this bike, and obviously that's for a lot of reasons. But to hear Mark saying he was having some of the same problems, if I was at Ducati, I would be a little concerned about that, because this is Mark's favorite track. He obviously knows it well. And if he's having the same problems that Bagnaia has been complaining about, then I'm wondering how close to the edge I'm getting. But I also have a question for you, because I thought I heard in the Sunday race that they'd actually gone and cleaned the track, or at least the starting grid again. Was that the case?
It may have been, because I think Binder was very vocal, because after the start on the sprint, because Binder, starting from 6th, had a horrible start, spun up on the dirty side and dropped almost to last and 13th, and he was very vocal saying it was just dangerous, like really, really dangerous. And a similar thing happened last year. So that's a great point, Matt, to bring up, actually, because the organisers don't like having their track or the conditions being called dangerous, and obviously nobody wants to see any riders or anyone get hurt. So they may have well gone and tried to clean up the track a little bit, because
that track is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it does get a lot of wind and dust naturally, and so that track just tends to be on the dirtier side, kind of like the way I think Qatar gets sand, that mix that just blows across it. It's similar.
Yeah, it's very dry. I think I was there in 2017 or 2018, and it's hot, and it is. You wouldn't think it in Spain, but it's a desert. Essentially, you're in the middle of a desert. So yeah, it gets very, very dusty. So poor old Binder, he was really quite angry about this, because the bike was good and he struggled. So he fell all the way down. But once Mark had regained his self and composure, spent a couple of laps settling in, past Morbidelli, past his brother. His brother did say that he had started to get little illusions that, I might be able to win this race, because when he saw Mark spin up, he thought he'd drop down to 9th or 10th, and he was like, there's no way he's going to get back. But as soon as Mark passed him, he knew it was kind of game over, and he just needed to concentrate on bringing home that second. And he did bring that second home, which is really good, because he's had a couple of wobbly rounds. He had Le Mans, crashed out of the main race at Le Mans, then Silverstone obviously crashing at the start, getting lucky, being able to restart again, and then obviously his confidence was a bit shot. Silverstone was an outlier, very strange in the glorious British springtime, freezing cold temps. It was all going wrong for them, but anyway, so at the end of the sprint, then, so Marc Marquez ends up winning by 2 seconds from his brother Alex Marquez. And as Jules said at the start of the show, normal service has been resumed this year. You would have thought in a sprint. So both of them have been 1-2 in all of the sprints so far this season, which is incredible. Aldeguer, after nailing Morbidelli, a fantastic podium again for a rookie, absolutely brilliant. Morbidelli in 4th, Acosta brings it home 5th, Digi bit of a stealth 6th, Vinales 7th, and an incredible Bezzecchi in 8th. In only the sprint, I think it was only like 11 laps, 10 laps, I think, the actual race, and Bez goes from 20th to 8th with some amazing pace, and surely that gave me hope. I was like, oh, can he actually challenge for the podium maybe on the Sunday, given a longer race? But I think, and then Bagnaia, a very lowly 12 coming in. But the star of the show for me was Aldeguer, fantastic. Aldeguer and Bezzecchi, so it was really good for them to see. So that sets up a salivating prospect for the main race on Sunday. So coming into the main Grand Prix review, then there's a few little topics as we do usually on the show. We split this down to a few major topics, and yeah, we've spoken about them already, but we need to give them both sort of equal praise really, and we have to mention it. It's just complete domination from the Marquezes on the Sunday race, and we'll start with Marc because this is the first time in 10 years that a rider has topped every single session of a Grand Prix, and it was almost the ultimate grand gentleman set, apart from he got denied the fastest lap in the sprint race. So he didn't have that. That was the only thing he didn't top, which is annoying. But every single session that he topped, which is incredible. And it was actually himself that did it 10 years ago in Sachsenring. So he's broken his own record, which is crazy domination. But oddly, this is a bit controlled, in my opinion, for Marc. Because last year we saw the bigger gap. I think he won by like 8 seconds last year on that GP23. This time, he seemed way more controlled, so he got a good start on the Sunday, got out front. But for the first 7 laps, Trumpets, he seemed to be like chilling out a little bit.
And would you be surprised, coming from me, if I said, I think it might have something to do with the tires?
Oh, really?
Yes. And here's the thing. Now, this is, to be fair, this is not me. This is me reading this. I believe it was maybe Matt Oxley or Valentine in the race was talking about this. But essentially, and we talked about how he's had this torrid run of these unexpected crashes. And this is the rear tire essentially pushing the front. And the front being so difficult to feel that it's gone before the riders can react to it. And what he thinks he's come across, or at least what I read was, and this makes sense to me, essentially at the start, the tire is a little too grippy, so you have to be careful with it to not overload the front and lose it.
Tire, you mean? Yeah.
The rear tire is too grippy at the start and will easily overload the front, so you have to be careful with your entries and with your lap times until you take a little starch out of it. And then you can really start to push. And when you said that 7 laps and then bang, 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 that fits perfectly with that idea that he's figured out. It's the opposite, where before you would just go and build a big gap and you worry about the end when the tires were really getting wobbly and loose and slick from the heat. It's the opposite here. They're too grippy at the start, and it's easy to take yourself out by losing the front. And having figured that out, be interesting to see if other people start to follow that example.
One thing that was really cool to see that stood out to me was Marc over the weekend was during his qualifying lap. He was on a push lap, and he had a little moment on a changeover from, like left to right, where he managed to get on the throttle and did a wheelie while doing that. And just enough to kind of throw off the balance, and where he almost high-sided. It reminded me of, I think it was Lorenzo in China in like 2008, where there's like a slight micro wheelie when they get on the gas while completely changing to the other side of the direction. And it just unloads suspension and then loads it again. And it's wild to see. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, this guy's pushing. And I think ever since that, I feel like he dialed it down a bit and kind of was a little bit more strategic on getting on the throttle.
That's a really good observation, and I know exactly the moment that you're talking about, the Lorenzo in 08. In China, that was kind of, desperate. His scruffy quali lap, and Marc even said it himself. He was like, I was kind of overriding a little bit there, and he kind of saw, so really good bike control there. But in the actual main race, they said this lap 7 and him trying not to overpush, and we didn't see that again in the main race. He didn't seem to have any moments at all in the main race, like the one that Adam just described. He wasn't over the limit having to pull out any tricks, and it was mad because he waited till lap 7 and everyone else was closing back up again. We'll talk about Bagnaia in a bit, but Bagnaia was fought off for Costa, and it was all closing up quite nicely. And I think I posted in the group chat saying this is way closer than I thought it was going to be. I thought Marc would just disappear, and then lap 7, He then rattles off 3 consecutive lap records, pulls the gap out to almost 2 seconds, and it was almost like, don't bother, lads. Like, I've kind of got this covered. Like, don't bother. And then he just knocked the pace off again. And then they seemed to close right up again. He just seemed to be at will to pull it out when he wanted. And as I've already said, he's had so many silly front-end crashes, Jules, that, like, yeah, this must have been constantly in the back of his head, just like, don't throw this away, don't be an idiot.
Yeah, because like we said in the beginning of the episode, he has had, for his standards, especially this season, a couple of scruffy weekends. And he needed to be careful, and he made some remarks about this. Actually, what Matt just said, that he realized that he needs to be careful with this front tire on the GP25, because it's so tricky, and he can correct and manage it with his super skills, and that's great for him. But he really needs to focus on how to ride this bike and not fall back into automatisms or his the way he was learned to ride that Honda. And that, I thought that was very interesting. And what was also interesting was when he started, after 7 laps, started to get into that rhythm and break record after record. He pulled away from Alex, but him pulling away left Alex a bit, how do you say this? Exposed.
Vulnerable?
Yeah, because he didn't have the marker or the toe that Mark provided him, and he fell back into the arms of Bagnaia and Acosta, and that provided us with, together with I think it was Acosta and Binder, with a great foursome that looked like really becoming a nice battle.
You see, you say it left him exposed because he didn't have a marker, but to me, what he lost was a slipstream that was helping him down the straights. And he'd spent more of his tires chasing his brother than the people whose pace came on later. And this is one of the interesting things about the way these races are starting to play out, is it's not just a given that you sprint, get a gap, and then you just maintain, because you can't maintain on these bikes the same way you used to. This isn't personal observation. This is, again, just research I've done. Because if you relax too much, then your tires start to go out of the window and you're just equally likely to crash the bike. You have to push, but your window of relaxation is very, very small, and you're always a bit on razor's edge.
And one thing that was new to me this weekend was we've seen Alex be consistent, and he can lead, but I've never really seen him maintain a gap in a way where if the guy's coming up behind, they're closing the gap behind, where he can just dial it up and turn it up. And he did that this weekend. I hadn't seen him do that before, where he was able to be consistent enough in reserve tire to be able to do that. And that's where at some point you saw Pecco get really close to him. Then he just opened the gap. And that's stuff you see Pecco do, you've seen Mark do that, but I've never seen Alex do it. And that's what really kind of stood out to me. It's like, oh, this guy's definitely leveled up this year.
That's a brilliant point. I was going to say something similar, because this is not the Alex Marquez that we were kind of, and taking nothing away from him, but I don't think anybody expected to see these performances this year. Alex Marquez, and usually had a reputation of a bit crashy, would maybe push over a bit win or bin, particularly if he sees the win a chance going away from him. Like before, I used to watch him, especially when he was on the Repsol Honda, like I just thought he was going to crash most things, or if he got half a sniff, he'd over push and chuck it down the road. And that's a great point by Adam. Like, it was controlled, and we've seen champions and seen like great riders do this, and knowing to have the discipline or just the very control to do this. And he seems to have got it this year. And I'm going to say this most episode, like we pretty much all laughed at Danny when he put his prediction in of Alex Marquez is going to be P3 in the championship, but it looks like he's going to be P2, and he looks like a complete rider, and he's just clicked with this GP24. He's been the strongest GP24 rider. It's absolutely amazing. So nice one, Alex. And yep, just impressive from the Marquezes. And one little side plot I'm quite enjoying is they're kind of arguing about which one their mum wants to win more, and they're making us swap shirts multiple times during the weekend. I can't imagine what their parents must feel like. The pride of seeing your two children up there dominating, the top pinnacle of motorcycle racing is absolutely crazy. So enough praising the Marquez. There's not much more we can say. Amazing weekend from both of them. So let's move on to somebody who has a bittersweet weekend. And I want to talk a bit about Bagnaia, Pecco Bagnaia, because from the doldrums and the lowly bit of the sprint to has he found his silver bullet? So on the Sunday warm-up, he changed his brake disc from what I believe was the normal diameter 340mm, sort of a wide diameter carbon brake disc, to a 355mm diameter brake disc, which is 15mm increased size. It's got increased weight, which we think might be about approximately 100 grams. This means the caliper may move, the weight distribution may change. There's all of these variables. The GP25 apparently has a lighter front ride height device, so it's going to have a slight different balance change anyway from the GP24. And what is it that Bagnaia has been complaining about all season? He's got no front end field, so they made a change in warm-up. And on Sunday, it almost looked like the old Bagnaia. He got a great start. He was nice and fighty. He had engaged. He had looked like Acosta doing some terrorism on him, was being a complete menace, Jules, in the braking zones. And Bagnaia, just his body, you could see it looked like the Bagnaia of old.
Yeah, you could see he was much more in a position to take the fight and to keep within the striking distance of Alex. Indeed, in the last couple of laps, Alex pulled a bit of a gap, but for lap after lap, he was like 3/10, 4/10 behind Alex. And so I started thinking maybe this is also like you can't really get close if you haven't got enough overspeed to actually overtake. But you could see he could ride that bike in an aggressive manner again. So it was. I can see how he was so relieved afterwards, and like you said, the change from to a bigger disc increases the weight, and the weight that was taken away from that front of the bike because they have a different ride height device, as you said, and that actually took away about 650 grams. And I know we are sitting here thinking like, what, grams? How much of a difference can it be? But apparently a lot. And even if it gives Bagnaia only the scent of having back what he couldn't find all season, and the rest maybe comes with that, and it's just a mindset of his or the belief that he can work with this bike, and so the actual difference to him might feel like a lot more than just what we call 100 grams or something.
Well, that's because it's more than just the weight we're talking about here. It's a bigger brake disc. It's going to heat up longer. It's going to be more resistant to fade. It's going to transmit vibrations differently into the suspension. And as Kyle aptly points out, if it's not a lot of actual weight on a scale, it's weight that's on the ground. It's not sprung, and it has inertia. And what he struggled with is feel. And what he struggled with specifically is braking like he's used to braking and having it lock instead of being able to modulate it. And a bigger brake disc, just thinking about it, makes a certain amount of, it's going to give him more room to modulate and dance on that than a smaller disc would.
Absolutely. And so Adam, like you're sort of more a rider expert sort of here. So even maybe 100 grams. Now, if you're an old school raver, you know 100 grams can make a big difference to your week. So even if you've got like 100 grams can make a big difference to a bike racer. Like, how would that feel to him? Like, would you be able to feel a discernible difference with this?
I mean, yeah, like Matt touched on the weight being a big difference for the front end feel, but I feel like if you don't have enough weight on the front end, it doesn't make sense to me for it to give you more feel, or I don't know if I phrased that correctly, but I feel like if the front end feels light, I can't imagine you're going to get a lot of feeling from it. You need to have a little bit of weight there. You need to be able to trust it. You need to be able to push it. But I feel like these guys work on such tiny margins where they're going to, like, for me, complete amateur. You could tell when your fuel tank has 1 gallon more than you would prefer, or, a gallon is like 6 pounds. And that's me running on stock suspension, without any kind of rider aids or worrying about engine braking. So I feel like 100 grams on your front wheel specifically, I feel like that's going to be a pretty big difference. As far as somebody like Mark, maybe not, because he'll just ride around it and say, oh yeah, it's good either way. But maybe a guy like Pecco might be more, picky, or trying to find, even if it doesn't make a substantial difference, it could be more of a mental thing, and opens the door to that part. But yeah.
Exactly that, Adam. The mental part for him must be maybe as big as the actual mechanical changes. And it's funny that you mentioned, like, maybe to Mark it doesn't make such a difference, because he actually made that remark after testing today. Like, he didn't feel like it made a lot of difference to him, but he rides in such a different way. And Pecco's thing is braking really hard on that front tire, and to Mark, he not using it in that way, it probably doesn't really matter what size it is, or the slight difference that it can make. But if it's your thing, like it's Pecco's, and it's the quality that made him stand out in recent seasons, then it's a huge thing. So I think what you saw afterwards, and if you saw Pecco's face, and if you saw how his garage box responded, it was like Carl said, like they found that silver bullet. And today's test apparently double proved that. And he said, like, yeah, I'm luckily it showed us what we already saw on the Sunday race. So yeah, let's bring on Mugello, I'd say.
And yeah, because this all gets back to what you said, Jules. It's about the rider style and what your limiting factor is. And if you're hitting the brakes like you did last year, and you're getting lockups and losing the front without even being able to notice it till you're already flat on the circuit, that's a massive problem for you, because you're pushing the front brake to, say, 99%, whereas your teammate is only using it at 93%, because as we were talking about before the show, how much more Mark uses the rear to help him navigate around the turns. So I can understand why this is a big deal to him personally, but everything we talked about goes into what the rider feels when they grab that brake. And the question I want to ask now is, seems like to me, if you have a rider who's struggling with the front brakes, why does it take this many races to think about putting a different sized brake disc on?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think even sort of Davide Todozzi even kind of said this, because he kind of alluded to they were getting a bit annoyed. He actually said they were getting a bit sick of hearing the same things over and over, and he was like, finally the engineers come up with an idea that we've never happened before. And we said this in our group chat. It's a pretty fundamental thing to change, but I think Bagnai's been so like finicky and so like I'm just losing the feel. He hasn't specifically mentioned the brakes. It's the feeling on the brakes, not the actual brakes themselves. And if anything, he seems incredibly sensitive to this. So it was funny to hear Todozzi almost getting like exasperated with engineers, but finally, like, we've found something and decide to try it. So like, Adam, I don't think this is a particularly common thing to be changing. Like, if you needed more weight on the front, they could just put some more ballast. So it seems like an odd thing to try, but yeah, an odd thing that they haven't tried. Like, one of the very first things that they tried is not just trying a different disc.
I mean, for that kind of weight, you could probably just change the springs in the forks if you just wanted more weight without a different change to the brakes. But what I was just kind of going to make a joke is that I was just in Italy for, I don't know, a week or so, and the delay on this, or the culture on this, doesn't really surprise me. That it just kind of lacks about everything. And so it's kind of that just culture. I mean, look at Ferrari and F1. It's like they got to send every decision to a committee by carrier pigeon. And yeah.
It's a yellow card. You mentioned Formula One.
Yeah, sorry.
Jules.
Yeah, when we were joking about this in our chat, I gave it a serious thought, and the only thing I can imagine is that Pecco or his chief must have been like, don't touch what we liked so much in the last seasons. Don't touch that front brake, and you can understand why you would say like, no, let's not mess with the one thing that didn't work for us. And in the end, it's so ironic that apparently it was that brake.
Yeah, and so it's great to see him back, and it's great to see him there. Hopefully, and as others have said, it's Mugello the next round. It's Mugello and then Assen. 2 tracks that he should, in theory, be the favourite at going in. He's really strong there. So let's all hope for everyone, because I like Pecco. I'm a big fan of Pecco. I love how honest he's being, and I like how well he's getting on with Mark and he's saying stuff. So, but Matt, one thing I found slightly worrying was, well, sort of worrying, it's nice to see him back, but how happy he was about finishing 3rd behind his teammate and a GP24.
I think when you're that lost, it's not about where you finish. It's about I'm back into a universe where I think I can make progress. And I know, like at the end of the race, he was making similar lap times to Mark. There's lots of good data that came out of this for him. And I noticed at the beginning too. I don't know if anyone says the very first lap, he almost overlapped Alex, and it seemed like to me he was backing off to be able to make a good run, and Acosta caught him, and then he got tied up in that battle for some time. But I get the sense that he might have had more pace than Alex, but he didn't have enough extra pace to get round him at this track. So we may not have seen the true measure of how much this has helped him in this particular race. But I would set out a marker, though. I don't think it's a GP. I think we have to look at his sprint performance to know whether or not this really makes a difference.
Yeah, and what we shouldn't forget, he had a horrendous weekend at Aragon last season. Like, I think he finished 9th in the sprint, and then he had this crash with Alex on Sunday. So imagine the idea he came to Aragon with this time, and then having the practice and the quality and the sprint that he had on Friday and Saturday. And I believe he even tried a longer fork as well this weekend, which didn't bring him anything in those first 2 days. So, you know, if you take that in mind, and he struggled so much there last year on that great GP24. Maybe this felt like a win for him. I don't want to sound like a Bagnaia apologist, but I can imagine, together with the relief that he had, like, I fixed my bike, that this played a role as well, that he must have had such low expectations.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody right now is a Bagnaia apologist. I don't like toxic fandom or anything like that. I'm a fan of all the riders, and I think for the sake of the sport, this would be great. I think everyone wants him back at the front and to be racy again. So you talk about not forgetting things. Something else you shouldn't forget is to maybe drop us an email and give us a bit of feedback. So you can do that, and you can get in touch with us by sending us an email. That's mrapexmoto@gmail.com. That's mrapexmoto@gmail.com. And whilst you're doing that, you can also watch us on YouTube, so you can see our faces, so you can see how wonderful Jules looks, you can see how smooth Adam looks, how smooth Matt looks in front of all of his trumpets, and how ropey I look with my pale UK skin. So you can also do that, and whilst you're there, you can also click subscribe as well, so you can look at the YouTube channel. So before we move on to our next subject, send us an email. Tell us what you think. Tell us how bad we are. All feedback is good, and we do reply and do respond to the emails. So I'd like to move on now from Bagnaia. It's good to see him back in the fray. He is 93 points off the championship lead now, which is whopping. But if he can sort out his problems, I think he's probably just going to try and build for next year. But somebody and people who are desperately trying to sort their problems out and build for next year to keep hold of their star rider is KTM. So the KTMs and Acosta sort of returned to form, and they've come back after being absent most of the year, to be honest. But is this cause to be happy? as we've mentioned, I think Adam mentioned, this is quite track specific for them. We had a great sprint and a brilliant main race for Acosta. Adam, like some really fighty, and I love him when he's fighting. He just seems like an absolute menace on the brakes.
So I guess KTM had a kind of pretty eventful offseason this past year that I don't know if most remember, but they were filing for bankruptcy. They had to shut down the factory, and they had, this huge influx of normal, business that just had to stop. And I feel like that kind of, we saw that in the results. We saw that snowball into what was happening at the first, few races of the season. I feel like once they got their situation resolved, they got some money getting back into the team. I feel like we're starting to see the effects from that now, and so there's a few months delay on it, but I think that hopefully this is a good turn for them. And I know that they have some stuff at testing today. I saw some photos earlier. But
yeah, some weird lunch boxes.
Yeah, they're looking like Ducati, and now if they're passing the Ducatis in a straight line, maybe they're faster. So it's a good outlook, and seeing Acosta back, fighting for position and not just a sprint, but in the GP, I feel like that's a huge light at the end of the tunnel for them. I'm sad about Binder, but he was maintaining his pace, and he didn't look like he was riding a Bronco, as everybody likes to say. He was pretty smooth too, and so yeah, I just wanted to kind of get the subject of KTM to highlight that they've bounced back like massively.
I agree with Adam. If you regard their winter and that they just saved their lives for the foreseeable future a couple of weeks back when they got this new investor. It's a miracle they're on the grid even still with four bikes, and I think the track was helping them a bit too, because especially Binder, you hear him complain a lot about the cheddar, about his rear jumping up and down. And in one of the reviews, I read that what Aragon helps them with is that there is hardly any grip, so their rear doesn't grip as much and starts chattering less. Therefore, so maybe it was a bit flattered by this track, but I think we already saw in recent races that the KTM's popped up in the top 10 more and more often, and it was a shame that Binder crashed out of that great foursome that we spoke about earlier, and Vinales crashed out on in the Sunday race too. But if that hadn't happened, but if my mother would
shoulda, woulda, coulda,
yeah, indeed, that's a more neat way to say it. They would have 3 bikes in the top 10, and they had 3 bikes in the points in the sprint on Saturday. So it's good to have that. It's good to have these different brands, with Yamaha catching up, with Honda catching up. So let's hope they had a good testing day today, and they can keep moving forward.
And this is where I bring up, wasn't Acosta the only person to run a hard front tire?
Yep, true.
Yep.
Yeah,
true.
Okay. And didn't around lap 12, halfway through the race, both of the other KTMs that were running top 10 pace crash by losing the front?
Yes, they did.
Well,
That's
okay.
I hadn't actually made that connection.
I'm not an engineer or a tire person or anything, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that is where they need to concentrate their efforts now, is how can they maintain a front tire and run one with the same grip as the other teams? Because if they can solve that, and that's why maybe we'll see better sprint performances from them first.
So looking at the lap chart, it looks like Binder ran 0.2 faster than Acosta on the lap before he crashed. So Binder was in the process of turning it up and then just pushed a little too much.
Yeah, oddly, for Binder, he said that he was just starting to increase and come into Acosta, but he actually said afterwards he was kind of sitting there waiting, trying not to chew his tires up, and on the actual corner that he crashed, even though he was pushing harder, he was just chilling out, and he actually went a tiny bit slower than he had the few laps before, and then tucked the front as a result, because he hadn't thought he loaded it. So yeah, I think he was just trying to push up, as Adam said, to there, and then just sitting there relaxing, and then went down. He was really, really frustrated with himself because he said the bike was going really, really well. But we've seen this with KTM loads. And I think I even said it. I expected them to plummet after mid-race distance with tyre wear issues, and they didn't. So that's really good. Oddly, Acosta, after the race, was basically asked, are you happy with the result? And he was like, no. Like, no, I'm not happy. Like, it's still not good enough. And he seems like it's going a bit sour. I think he's getting very frustrated. He knows himself he's a crazy talent, and maybe he's being a bit wasted on the KTM. So with this investment, it is good, but they need to start getting results, and soon. So Maverick has been the lead KTM rider, which is odd, and still expecting him to do his Houdini and his disappearing act mid-season, and he still kind of hasn't done it yet, which is odd. But they've got another rider. There's Bestia. There's Bastianini, who's been really, really, really struggling as well, and he's nowhere. But he actually, I think, found something, he said, this weekend, and they've increased the rake angle and actually made the bike a little bit longer, and he says he's feeling a little bit more comfortable on that now. So it'll be interesting to see his results from the test today and then how he goes moving forward, because we used to see him, but he's a multiple race winner. I mean, he was troubling the leaders last year on that Ducati, and he's having a shocking season this season, like really struggling on the KTM, whereas Maverick has just sort of got on with it. Binder's also having a shocker, and I think Binder's out of contract at the end of the season as well, isn't he? So Binder's going to come under a lot of pressure. So if you're KTM, would you want to get rid of Binder, the person who's been helping you develop the bike? It's interesting to see what goes on there, and surely there's going to be some of the other manufacturers are going to be sniffing around Acosta.
Dennis Sanchez is kind of making his way up too, and so I feel like the pressure's there, and to have a rider from a different market rather than somebody from South Africa, I feel like those could definitely come into play.
And yeah, so Onchu, is Onchu Turkish? Has he got Turkish descendants?
Yeah, he's Turkish.
That's interesting, because there might be another Turkish rider coming next year as well. So if we have two Turkish riders on the grid, would be great.
Those are the rumors. We'll see. Supposedly next week is an announcement.
We're of course talking about Toprak Razgatlioglu. I can never say his name. Let's just call him Toprak. Razgatlioglu. Nice one. I was actually in London getting very drunk with one of his former team members, actually, before. I'm not going to mention any names, but yeah, and he was trying to teach me how to say his name, and I failed miserably after about 8 pints, and I'm not going to attempt it anymore.
Just pretend you're cool and say stop rack, and you'll fit right in.
There we go. Lovely. The World Superbike fans will obviously be very aware of Toprak and an amazing talent he is, and it'll be fantastic to have him on that Pramac Yamaha. So can't talk too much more about KTM. Hopefully we see them still at the front, and hopefully I want them to give Acosta a strong bike, because as I said, I loved his battles. I loved seeing him in the braking zones again, and he's just a complete menace. I love the fact he just lets the brake off and just lunging people and just going for it. So we want to see him towards the front. So we've got some honourable mentions now, and everyone drink, rejoice, ring the bells. Johan Mir actually finished a race. This is one of the first times this year he's actually got to the end of the race on that Honda, one of the most unluckiest riders on the grid, and he crashes so many times. He finished the race, and there's a pretty shocking stat actually here, and he seemed absolutely chuffed, but this is a former world champion, MotoGP world champion, let's not forget, and a race winner. This is P7. He finished P7. This is his best result since 2023, which is the Indian Grand Prix P5. That's insane. Like, he has had a torrid time on the factory Honda, an absolutely awful time, and particularly what Zarco's been doing. I mean, in that time, Rins has won on the LCR Honda, Zarco's won, Zarco's had lots of top five, Zarco's had podiums. Mir has been absolutely nowhere, and in the sprint he got taken out by Jack Miller. I still haven't seen the crash, but he looked pretty upset with Miller in the gravel, Jules.
Yeah, and you can see. I mean, it's not great anyway. And he said that Miller, shouldn't have made a dangerous move like he did. But it was only 2 races ago when Mir got violently taken out by Bastianini at Le Mans. where he broke one of the bones in his hand. So he's such an unlucky guy on a bike that is supposed to be coming good this season. And imagine you're the factory team leader, and it's the satellite bike with Johan Zarco who takes all the shine and glory. So you could see why he was thrilled with his best result in recent history. But we shouldn't forget he's a world champion and one of the few on the current grid. So and he's supposedly secure for next season. And if the recent results and what Zarco is doing is any promise of what's coming, it will be really good to see him take another few steps and get up there in the top 4 or 5.
Yeah, and let's not forget that as a satellite team, sometimes your life is a little bit simpler when it comes to delivering a bike that can perform at not its peak theoretical potential, but what you can actually put on the track. So sometimes life as a factory rider is going to be more complex because you have more input and more engineers and more things to work through. But also, I read Miller's account of that crash, and it was actually pretty hilarious. He absolutely admits it's his fault. Just basically, I was making the pass and I got onto the dirty side of the track, and it was dirtier and slipperier than I anticipated. And his whole defense is basically, well, I did hit him and we both went off track, and that was tragic and all. But I made the same exact pass on someone else later correctly. So it really wasn't that it was an impossible move I was trying.
One thing we kind of got to keep in mind is that he inherited a bike that almost took, finished the career of one of the greatest riders of all time. And so he's having to turn that around and try to make it work with, the team that also probably lost a bunch of money by losing their sponsorship from some of the big brands that were, legendary to the sport, really, like Repsol. They're gone. And who knows how much money they contributed to, the HRC factory to help fund a lot of development. So you just kind of got to make sure to put that in perspective. I feel like a lot of, Mir can get a bad rap, but I feel like he got handed crap and he's trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, that's a tough gig. That's a really tough gig on that bike. And too right, it's a bike that's broken many riders. Let's not forget, this is the bike that also put Lorenzo out as well and finished Lorenzo off, because he struggled to ride it and broke his back. I think he had a huge crash at Assen, and I think that's pretty much what finished him. It was like, I didn't know why I crashed and why I'm crashing. And obviously we see what's happened to Mark on it and stuff like that. So no, that's a good point. I'm always a bit harsh on Mir because I just, after seeing what Zaki does, he's pushing, but you have to hand it to him. He's a bit like Mark in a way. He never give up, just push, and he crashes. The point, I think Neil Hodgson made this point a couple of seasons ago when he was riding around pretty much in last place, still 2 seconds off the pace, and still crashing. It just shows that he's still pushing really hard just to sort of be last, and he's giving it his all. So fair play. And I just hope they've got a very good sponsorship for fairings and bar ends. I'm sure they have, and foot pegs, because I think they're getting through to him like there's no tomorrow. But it's great to see Mir back up there, and let's hope he gets a bike that he can actually fight really, really hard with. Yamaha, I want to talk about Yamaha a little bit because they had a bit of a shocking fall from grace this round. They made some slight ride height device tweaks after the heartbreak of Silverstone, but the bike wasn't working at all, really. And I think even in the test today, Quartararo said they're still struggling to dial the electronics in. So really hot, slippery track surface. Always used to be, old school MotoGP fans, I thought that always used to be Yamaha territory, really. I thought hot, slippy sort of Yamaha is always supposed to be a really sweet handling chassis, but I don't know, Yamaha seems to have really gone off the boil a little bit. And Quattararo's an emotional rider, that's why we all love him, we love to see his things. But Jules, he had several little freak out moments during sort of quali and practice, and this frustration of slapping the tank when the bike doesn't do what he wants it to do.
You could almost see his frustration piling up during the practice sessions, and Quartararo is one of the riders who just blatantly says that he doesn't like the Aragon track, and so probably the mindset with which he came there wasn't great, and he must have already knew that he wasn't gonna get a fourth pole position this weekend. But yeah, he just couldn't get that. It reminded me of images that we saw last season when he would just not be able to make that bike turn, and he would slap his fist on the tank, and it wasn't his weekend, and it wasn't anybody's weekend at Yamaha, because they were all outside the top 10, outside of Q2. And it was a shame, because we really liked having Fabio up there in the last couple of race weekends, and let's just hope that this is an outlier, and that next weekend at Mugello he's and let's hope not only him but Miller and Rins that they are back where we saw them the last couple of races.
I say there's nothing wrong with a little bit of percussive maintenance. You never know when it's going to unlock that extra tenth. Now, the thing that struck me is not that his frustration, or not that Yamaha didn't do well, but that they showed up so completely off on the Friday. And yet by the time we saw the first qualifying session, they had that rear so much more under control, which, if I understand rightly from talking to you guys who know more than me, a lot to do with the electronics and the engine braking and the rider and how they interact through those turns. He wasn't the only one having trouble, but Yamaha was completely wrong with what they brought on Friday. And they were able to at least bring it to rideability, I guess you'd say. So this gives them a huge clue going forward for their software engineers to work with. And I think it's an actually extremely important data point for them. And I'm going to be very curious to see how they do when we see them at the next track.
Well, one of the main problems that Yamaha's had over the last couple of years is they have the power from the motor, but they just can't get it down to the ground through the tire. The tire, it's like they've had to work on dial in the ECU with the engine braking and I guess probably throttle maps. But I feel like over here at Aragon, it seems like I have a feeling it was all the dust and the dirt on the track that was causing a little bit more wheel spin than what they're used to. And so I feel like they were able to narrow it down a bit, but I think that's kind of what threw off their weekend a bit. And I think Yamaha will be back, and they've showed flashes of their cornering pace kind of that we got used to over the last 10, 15 years, where I feel like they're gonna be good at certain sectors at Mugello, but then they're probably going to lose out on the straight to KTM and Ducati. But I think come Assen, where it's a lot of fast, really fast, high-speed corners and switchbacks, I think that Fabio hopefully gets another, good Q2. And then Misano is my, highlight, I feel like, for Yamaha. I feel like Misano's really going to show off what that bike can do.
Hopefully. Well, touch wood, we actually get to see him come up with a thing, because I still love Fabio to nab his win this season will be great. We've run out of time, but someone else who deserves a mention very quickly is Bezzecchi, P8 again in the Grand Prix. He was one of the stars of the sprint, but in the Grand Prix he got to the exact same position. But P20 to P8 is nothing to be ashamed of at all. And if he started a bit further up, I think his pace looked absolutely amazing. So Aprilia are getting stronger as well. So talking about getting stronger, Marc Marquez now has a 32-point lead in the championship over his brother. Bagnaia 93 points off the ever-present and amazingly consistent Franco Morbidelli is 118 points back, and Digi regains his P5 from Zarco, who had a bit of a shocker. We've not really mentioned Zarco. Zarco binned it. Not a great weekend for Zarco at all. So Digi is 134 points back. So as ever, we like to finish with some awards, and we're going to go for Rider of the Weekend. And Adam, considering you're returning, and I'm not going to stitch you up and let the others take yours, I'll go to you first. Who was your Rider of the Weekend?
My Rider of the Weekend is going to be Morbidelli. He was, it wasn't super, I don't know how to phrase it. It wasn't extravagant. He was just there. but he was there and he didn't leave his position. Basically, he was fighting for the podium. He was maintaining pace. He was just present, and he was getting a lot of TV coverage. I just felt like he had a solid weekend, and it kind of, he put up a little bit of a defense against the Spanish Armada of a full top 5 of Spanish riders. And I feel like so it's not a Spanish championship in Spain, I feel like that definitely helps the vibe of MotoGP.
Absolutely. It's brilliant. Trumpets, who was your rider of the weekend?
This is kind of an obvious one, but I'm not going to steal the one I know you're going to take. So I'm going to say Bagnaia for me. From coming from that sort of a disastrous sprint, the horrible weekend, a terrible run of results, being completely lost, to put something on the bike and then immediately find enough confidence to really go after the podium position and go after P2. That's a pretty incredible turnaround. And it sort of shows you why he's been as successful as he's been.
Absolutely. Hard to argue with that. Jules, who's yours?
I'm doubting what you're gonna do then, Kyle, with what is your pick, but I think you're gonna go Acosta, so I'm gonna take Mark. I mean, we kind of jokingly said like business as usual, return to regular service, but you still have to do it. And, you know, we said he crashed on 3 out of the 7 Sundays we had before this one. And to come there and it's your backyard, and last season on an inferior bike, you won by a stretch, you still had to do it. And he did it in every session. So, hats off to him.
Oh, fair play. I was not actually going to go Acosta. I was going to go Aldeguer, actually. I was going to go Aldeguer as my thing, just purely for his battling and in both ways, and also it ties in with Adams, with Morbidelli, them two clattering into each other going down the back straight on multiple occasions.
That was awesome.
Brilliant, yeah, brilliant racing. So mine is Aldeguer. So we'll go for our final award then, and that is a moment of the weekend. And I'll keep the same order. We'll go to you, Adam, then Trumpets, then Jules.
So the Moto2 finish for that race on Sunday was incredibly close. It was down to a photo finish of like half of the front wheel, if that much. It was basically just a tire between Onchu and Morea. And don't forget, MotoGP is getting a race in Brazil, I think next year. And so I don't know if Morea has any hopes to be in the GP team, but I feel like that kind of opens the window to kind of wave his passport around, and who knows.
Interesting. I like it. Trumpets, what was yours?
Well, I think mine was something you've already mentioned, and it's that battle between Aldeguer and Morbidelli, because I watched that. I was like, oh my gosh, look at what Morbidelli's doing. He's smashing into him, that poor rookie. But then I find out later that actually Aldeguer pretty much did that to Morbidelli on the first lap. So they were laughing about it afterwards. Their sense of humor is just different than the rest of us, I suppose. But that was fantastic. Made the whole end of the race just on the edge of your seat.
Nice. And Jules?
I'm gonna go for the images of Pecco Bagnaia's garage box after the finish on Sunday, and not because of it was so cozy and romantic, but if you look, it had Tardozzi there, it had Gigi there, and they were celebrating. Tardozzi was hugging both Pecco's wife and his sister and yelling. And why did it matter so much? Because we as well have, speculated like, maybe Ducati lost his patience with Pecco, or Marquez won the garage. But especially in a week where Pecco was linked to Yamaha and whatever, you saw how much it meant to that whole bunch, the whole Ducati team, to have him back on his way. And I thought that was very telling.
Yep. Very, very nice. It's just odd that it's for a P3, but you're right. Yeah, it actually meant loads of things. My moment of the weekend was the awful dance that the Marquezes did in front of their stand. And it's not saying I'm saying it's a good thing. I think they were taking the mickey with the amount of time it took them to celebrate and get back to like Parc Ferme again. Yeah, fair enough. It's your home race. You're in front of your fan stand. But the other little bit of that was the domination. It was like we are 93, and then just tagged onto the corner of the grandstand was the 73 Alex Marquez bit, and it was just like it was just talk about being absolutely dominated by Big Bro. I felt a little bit sorry for Alex there. He had like the tiniest little sliver of his fan stand at the end, but anyway, all in good jest. But I do think I was surprised I didn't get into trouble of how long it took him to get back to Parc Ferme. If I was Bagnaia and everyone else, I'd be like, oh, for God's sake, come on, lads, like you're taking the mickey now. Anyway, if you don't want to take the mickey, you can go follow my panel. So, Adam, where can people follow you?
I'm at adam.grandprixtravel on Instagram. I've also got, I'm on Reddit quite a bit. I have a subreddit called our Grand Prix Travel. You can find me around. I'll be in Canada this weekend for that GP, probably hosting or I'll be part of a meetup on Sunday night post-race. But yeah, just follow me. I'll be around.
Nice one. Trumpets, where can people get you?
At MattPT55 on pretty much all your social medias.
Excellent. And Jules?
You can find me on Blue Sky, and the handle is Jules on Racing.
Lovely. You can also follow me as well. I'm at CarPowerF1 on Twitter, but I'd rather you go and follow the show instead and give us a like on YouTube. That'd be brilliant. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time to review round 9, one of my favourite Grand Prix of the whole year. It's Mugello. As always, thanks for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.